Of course. And I mean, look, the fantasy community is going nuts about Dontavian Wicks or maybe Luke Musgrave, the tight end. So
Yeah,
they've got plenty of weapons. You know, the youngest offensive skill group in the National Football League. There's a reason they structured Josh Jacobs' contract the way they did. They can get out clean in a couple of years, and from there maybe it's time to pay a receiver or two. You're seeing the ripple effects of that, and we'll move on to our team preview shortly here because they're a team that went all in on their quarterback. The Kansas City Chiefs, you mentioned restructuring the contract and being able to make room for some players. We just watched, an all-pro level L'Jarius Sneed walk out, who saved that team's season in the AFC Championship game, punching the ball out at the end line, and as a shutdown corner. He has to go in a trade because they prioritized, Trent McDuffie and Chris Jones, who I mentioned earlier. The Miami Dolphins are a perfect example. In order to prepare themselves for this Tua contract extension, you knew it was getting done because Christian Wilkins, Andrew Van Ginkel, Jerome Baker, Robert Hunt, all these key pieces out the door. And so there's going to be repercussions, and we're going to see a Miami Dolphins team that, again, has the explosive weapons on offense, but critical depth and star players on the defensive side of the football. It's going to be a drastically different team than what we may have seen the last couple of years ago. So exciting to see. But nonetheless, there are repercussions for paying guys that earn these types of mega contracts. So, last thought, Nick.
Well, I mean, listen, there are consequences. But this is where the league is right now because the salaries keep escalating for players. They're not going to go down. Now, the league is going to have to do something as a whole to try to put a cap on this because, I mean, this quarterback salaries are ridiculous. If they keep going up, what money will you have to sign other guys? So that means a lot of teams are going to lose a lot of marquee players because you can't afford them.
Yep. He's Nick Ferguson. I'm Alex Hardy. As we continue to navigate this training camp period, getting ready for preseason football right around the corner, we do want to dedicate time every single episode to preview some of the teams around the National Football League that we find intriguing. We have no particular set order. We're not going division by division, but if you've missed, in previous episodes, we previewed the Houston Texans, the Los Angeles Rams. Make sure if those are your teams or if you're interested in two teams that have playoff aspirations, maybe a deep run at that, feel free to go on our podcast feed, YouTube, wherever you download us for earlier those guys' episodes. Now, Nick, I mentioned we're doing a former team of yours.
Yes.
We'll save your thoughts on the Denver Broncos because today we're going to look at the New York Jets, one of the most interesting teams based on the level of expectation, whether that's built by a fan base or just simply by the arrival of Aaron Rodgers. Of course, things were an absolute disaster 4 snaps into the season, or 5. 4 snaps of the football, 1 snap of Aaron Rodgers' Achilles. Moving forward into 2024, I think with the injury to Aaron Rodgers, immediately you realize some issues with the offensive line. You realize issues with the backup quarterback. I think that was the biggest emphasis that the Jets made this offseason, but sort of big picture, Nick, I want to just start with, how are the vibes? You've got an incumbent head coach and GM that have swung and missed on a number 2 overall pick in Zach Wilson, who's now your best friend in Denver. And they've hit on a lot of other picks, but they pushed all their chips in this time a year ago for Aaron Rodgers, and we have yet to see how that comes to fruition. So, Nick, the coaches in particular, or this quarterback, to steal a line from Jerry Jones, are the New York Jets all in on this season alone?
Yeah, absolutely. Because how many years can you say that you have with Aaron Rodgers? And Aaron Rodgers didn't play last year. So maybe you can say, well, that gives him another season or even half season. But here's the one thing I definitely know. Not having Aaron Rodgers in the mix changed everything for the New York Jets last season.
Of course.
Look what they did this season. Mike Williams comes over after having, an excellent career with the Chargers, getting injured. He now gets a chance to revitalize himself with someone who's going to get him the ball. Garrett Wilson is a phenomenal wide receiver. He was last season. He's going to be even better with a healthy Aaron Rodgers. And everything for the Jets kind of hinges on the fact of Rodgers being healthy. This is why you look at the Jets offensive line and what Joe Douglas did and Robert Saleh. It was like almost a DIY situation with their offensive line. They changed everything. They changed the walls. They changed the carpets. Now it's got hardwoods on the floor. Now they have marble countertops, brass fixtures. This is what the Jets offensive line looks like. If they can keep Aaron Rodgers upright, then they have an opportunity to compete with Tua and the Miami Dolphins.
Now, this is a New York Jets organization that is, for lack of a better term, great reporting from the Athletic's Diana Rossini. And again, it's just reporting. There's conjecture. It can be he said, she said. But Aaron Rodgers had a wish list. He didn't say he did, but what was reported, I want Randall Cobb and I want, all these other guys. I want Alan Lazard. That was the other big one. He got everything that he had asked for. The Jets this offseason, I think, still have ceded control to Rodgers entering his age 41 season, but it's more organic in terms of what they did to add, right? Both in free agency and in the draft. You talked about Mike Williams. They attacked the wide receiver position. They attacked the offensive line, right? It's kind of funny, though, because all in all, yes, issues with the offensive line, issues with receivers outside of Garrett Wilson. The most money they spent on a single player in free agency was for their backup quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, getting a 2-year, $12 million contract. That was the most cash they handed out to a single player this offseason. They clearly recognized that Zach Wilson, Mike White previously, other guys that came in just weren't effective. So you bring in a veteran signal caller and Tyrod Taylor, and in the draft, Florida State's Jordan Travis. It's almost as if they have two better options than they had all the last 2 seasons if something were to happen to Aaron Rodgers. Now, they did everything they could to try to prevent that from happening, right? Tyron Smith and John Simpson coming over from the Cowboys and the Ravens, respectively. These guys are going to start. We'll see with Tyron Smith because he hasn't played 17 games. He hasn't played 16 games even for quite a long time. And in the first round, the 11th overall pick, with Brock Bowers on the board or whomever else you wanted to try to put to the Jets, Olu Fashanu, who comes from Penn State. What I really like is that he doesn't have to come in and start right away. He may just be able to do that if he's that effective, if he's going to be able to hit the ground running in training camp. And his relationship with Tyron Smith through Duke Manyweather, they've worked out with the offensive line guru together for a couple of years now. So there's already a familiarity and a bond for the veteran leader and the heir apparent who had unbelievable physical tools playing in a high-powered run game, let's say, for the Nittany Lions this past year. So the offensive line help, the receiver help. You mentioned Mike Williams, Malachi Corley, aka the Yak King. He's not Devo Samuel. He's one of one. But nonetheless, he racked up a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns over at Western Kentucky, the former Hilltopper, catching passes from Bailey Zappi at one point. Shout out my New England Patriots, of course. So, look, through both the offensive line and at the receiver position, and I think one of my favorite running backs in the draft, Braylon Allen, in the 4th round, the Jets pushing their chips in on offense. And I'm curious, Nick, if this is a high-powered passing offense now, or we're just going to get a heavy dose of Breece Hall, clearly their best player on offense a year ago.
I think the best thing for the Jets is it's kind of a simple formula. It's called balance, right? You want to be able to throw the ball and run the ball. You don't want to be lean heavily either on the run or pass because it essentially makes you one-dimensional. And it dictates to the defense, all we have to do is shut down this aspect of their game plan, and then now we have them right where they want them. And knowing like Hackett is kind of like the de facto offensive coordinator because he has the title, but we all know at the end of the day, who's calling the plays at the line of scrimmage? Who's checking to certain plays? It is that guy, Aaron Rodgers.